Okay, so chapter 3 starts on page 61 if you'd like to follow along in the book. We're going to be talking about clinical measurements of numbers, time, and temperature. So the first subject of this lecture, I'm going to focus on converting Arabic numbers to Roman numerals and back the other way. So Arabic numerals are the numbers that we use every day. So 1 through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Roman numerals aren't as common, but sometimes you will see them in the pharmacy. Any scheduled drugs are listed in Roman numerals. A lot of the pharmacy texts that we use, the table of contents may be in Roman numerals. Doctors also tend to use Roman numerals occasionally when they're writing handwritten prescriptions to indicate, how many tablets or capsules somebody should take, etc. So it is important for us to know how to interpret these numbers so we can correctly interpret these prescriptions and what they mean. So we're going to start out with this basic list of Roman numerals. I'm going to go ahead and write these down so we can use these as a reference as we get into some of these problems. So SS, most of the time it's going to have a line over that as well. SS is 1/2. And then we have I, V, X, L, C, D, and M. And keep in mind, you can see these numerals. Sometimes they will write them in uppercase, other times they'll write them in lowercase. Sometimes you may see, lines on top and bottom of the Roman numerals. So for I, V, and X, which I'll show you here when I switch my screen, what that looks like. So I is 1, V is 5, X is 10, L is 50, C is 100, D is 500, and M is 1000. So I would suggest coming up with some sort of acronym that helps you remember these Roman numerals. Most of the time, we're pretty familiar with I, V, and X, so 1, 5, and 10. These are the ones that people tend to struggle with. So I always use the acronym Lazy Cows Don't Moo. That helps me remember the order of these, but if you can come up with something else, you're more than welcome to do that. But do just be prepared to know what each of these Roman numerals stand for when it comes time for the exam this week. Now, with Roman numerals, we also have a set of rules that we need to follow. And these will start to make more sense just, with repetition, the more times you do these types of conversions. So number 1, we always want to use the largest numeral possible. Number 2, we can only repeat a Roman numeral 3 times. We cannot repeat it more than 3 times. For I, X, and C, I'll make a little asterisk here next to those so we can come back to this when we get there. So for I, X, and C, when a lower number comes after a higher number, we're going to add those together. And these are the only numerals that you can put before a numeral as well. So when they go before a higher number, we're going to subtract them. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in just a little bit. I know it sounds a little bit confusing right now. And then this last rule here, we're always going to use I before V and X before L and C before D and M. So I'm going to make some hash marks here. So I can only be used before V and X. And then X can only be used before L and C. And then C can only be used before D and M. So like I said, once we go through these examples, it'll be a little bit more clear. I would suggest turning in your book to page 62. That way you have these rules right next to us as we follow along, as I go through these examples here. So let's look at these examples in the slides first. So whenever we're converting Arabic numbers into Roman numerals, I want you to break down the number between the place values here. So we think of the number 35 as 30 plus 5, okay? So when we're looking at our list of Roman numerals, we want to use, remember, the largest numeral possible. So if you're looking at your list, and this may be hard to see, but once again, they're listed on page 62, and I'm also going to make my screen showing here in just a little bit. So when you're looking at your list of Roman numerals, you may think, well, 50 is the closest to 30. However, it's larger than 30, and the rule to subtract anything from 50 would mean that we would have to put something before an L, okay? Now, anytime you put something before a larger numeral, that's when you subtract, but you can only put one numeral before a larger number, okay? So 50 in this case would not work because the closest we could get would be to put an X before an L, which would only give us 40, okay? So in this case, 10 is going to be the numeral that's closest to 30. And remember, back to our rules, we can repeat a numeral 3 times. So when we're writing 30, we're going to think of that as 10 plus 10 plus 10. So x plus x plus x. So that would give us 30. And then for that additional 5, we would need to add in another v. So 35 would be x, 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 v. Same thing for 24. The closest numeral that we can use would be 10. So we're going to repeat that twice. So 10 plus 10 would give us 20. Now to get 4, we cannot break the rule that says you cannot repeat a numeral more than 3 times. So we can't just have 4 ones, essentially. We can't just have 4 i's. So we're going to have to use that subtraction rule. So if I put an I before a V, a smaller number coming before a larger numeral says we're going to subtract. So in this case, 5 minus 1 gives us 4. So here we would have the 2 x's for 20, and then the IV for 4, so 24. So let's go through some more examples here, really practicing with those rules. So looking here, we have 75, and I'll bring my list back so we have that as a good reference here. So we have the number 75. We want to convert this into Roman numerals, okay? So we look at our list. So like I said, sometimes you'll see these with lines over the top and bottom. That's still I, V, and X. Just wanted you to see that firsthand. So we want to find the numeral the largest possible. Starting out, we could either use 50 or 100 because 75 is right in the middle. We don't want to use 100 because we can't subtract anything from 100, another Roman numeral, to get an even 75, okay? So we want to use 50. So if we start with 50, that would be our L. So if we've already used 50 here, we need to add another 25. So you can write it down like this if you prefer. So now we need to think about how to write 25. Well, 10 would be the closest. And remember, we can repeat a numeral more than once, but not more than 3 times. So for 20, we could write x plus x, that would give us 20. So here we have 50 plus 10 is 60, plus 10 is 70. Now we need that additional 5 here, and V gives us 5. So this problem now is essentially 50 plus 10 plus 10 plus 5, which gives us 75 here. So that would be our answer. Now, let's look at 17. Look at our list. Closest numeral is going to be 10. So if we had 10 here, so we have 10. We need to add 7 more. So now we need to know how to write 7. Well, 5 would be the closest. So if we added a V here, now we have 10 plus 5 is 15. So we need 2 more. So we could do 2 ones or 2 I's. So 10 plus 5 is 15, plus 1 is 16, plus 1 more is 17. Now 38. Look at our list once again. We can't use XL because that would only give us 40. So we got to start out with the 10. And we can repeat that 10 3 times. So 10, 20, 30. Now we need to write out 8. So we basically are doing 30 plus 8 here. So 8, well, I can't put 2 ones before an X because that would break the rule. We can only have one smaller number here before a larger. So I'm going to have to start with the 5. So 5 is V. And then we have 6, 7, 8. So I need 3 more I's there. So 10, 20, 30, 35, 36, 37, 38. All right, so now let's look at 999. Now this is a big one, so look and see which numeral would be the closest. Well, 1,000 is only 1 away from 999. So you may think, well, we could just put an I in front of an M. However, that is breaking rule number 8. Because remember, it says you can only put an I before V and X. You can only put an X before L and C. And you can only put a C before D and M. So I cannot put I before M. Okay. So the next closest numeral would have to be 500. So we're going to start out with D. So right now we have 500. Now we need to find what would give us 900 if we're just looking at this place value first here. So 500, well, we would need to add another 400 to give us 900. And then to write out 400, well, we can't repeat C 4 times because that is breaking the second rule. You can't repeat a number more than 3 times. So we're going to have to start with 500. Now, 500 is more than 400. However, if we put a C before a D, that would be 500 minus 100, which would give us that 400. So if we do a C, D here, that would give us 400. Okay, because anytime a smaller numeral comes before a larger, we subtract them. So 500 minus 100 gives us 400. So far we have 900. Now we need to get this place value, which would be 90. And then at the end, we're going to need to add in another 9. Okay, so we've got 500 plus 400. Now we need to write out 90. So once again, look at our list. 100 is the closest here. And we can put an X in front of a C because our rule tells us that X can go before L or C. So if we put an X before a C, that would be 100 minus 10, which would give us 90. So XC would give us 90. Now we need to write out 9. So 9, closest Roman numeral would be 10. And we can put an I before an X because that is following the rule. So I before an X would be 10 minus 1, which would give us 9. So IX would give us 9. So we have 999. Now, if that was confusing to you, I'd suggest, going back in the video, watching that process again, because that is a great number to practice when we're using that rule of putting a smaller number in front of a larger one to subtract. All right, now let's look at 124. Well, closest Roman numeral would be 100. So C would give us 100. Now if we want to write out 20, we could take X twice because that would give us 20. And then we need to write out 4. Remember, we cannot do 4 I's, that would break the rule. So we would need to do IV. So that would give us 5 minus 1, which would be 4. So 124. Now, this last one here, 2,612. Well, the closest numeral here is going to be 1,000. And we can repeat an M twice to give us 2,000. Now we need 600. So looking over here, well, 500 is the closest. So D would give us 2,500. Adding a C would give us another 100 here. So 2,600. Now I need 12. The closest one would be X, which would be 10. So far I have 2,610. And then if I add 2 I's, 10, 11, 12. 2,612.